It was a golden morning in the city's financial district. The mirrored glass of Wellington Global's headquarters gleamed under a cloudless sky as the black cars of the Chinese delegation approached the main entrance with military precision. Inside, on the 45th floor, Vivian Wellington, the legendary 78-year-old CEO, paced in circles like a caged wolf. Her stiletto heels tapped irregularly on the marble floor, and her pearl necklace, an heirloom from her mother, trembled slightly with each tense step. Vivian was a woman who never asked for help. Raised in an era when women in leadership were almost a myth, she had built her empire by breaking down doors and silences. She was respected, feared, and, though she would never admit it, profoundly lonely. That morning, she was set to hold a crucial meeting with investors from Shengxin Industries, a Chinese tech conglomerate that could save the company's financial arm from collapse. The contract was ready. The boardroom was prepared. The problem: the official translator had simply vanished. "He's gone?" Vivian gripped the phone with one hand, massaging her temples with the other. "I don't want explanations. I want solutions." On the other end of the line, her assistant stammered. No other employee knew Mandarin or technical English, and time was running out. Vivian hung up. For a moment, her eyes settled on the city view, as vast and distant as the silence enveloping her within. Then she heard something that made her turn her head. A man was pushing a mop bucket, silent, head lowered. He was at the end of the corridor, collecting rags and arranging the office's metal trash cans. It was the morning shift janitor, tall, black, wearing a faded navy blue uniform. His name was Nathan, but no one called him that. To most executives, he was boy, cleaner, or simply invisible. Vivian had passed by him countless times, but she never knew his name, never looked into his eyes, never saw him as anything more than a shadow cleaning the floor. "What are you still doing here?" she said without looking directly at him. "This floor should have been clean an hour ago." Nathan didn't respond immediately. He finished picking up the papers and said in a calm voice, "I'm on my way, ma'am." Vivian huffed and returned to her office. Her hands were still trembling. The Chinese delegation was minutes away from arriving. No translator, no negotiation, no salvation. Nathan placed the bucket in the service elevator, but he didn't go down. Something inside him resisted, as if years of silence and observation had finally pushed something to the surface. He had seen all those faces pass by, suited, hurried, arrogant. He had overheard confidential conversations leaking through half-open doors. He had read reports forgotten in the printer. In silence, he had learned every word, every acronym, every nuance of that glass empire. And above all, he listened and remembered, always. At 11, Nathan had been taken by his grandmother to live in China. She was a missionary in Chengdu. He grew up among temples and markets, learning Mandarin as naturally as breathing. His grandmother used to say, "One day, all this that you're living in silence will be a bridge no one expects." But the world didn't care about the bridge. When he returned to the US at 23 with a degree in Oriental literature in hand, he found no place. His last name sounded too strange for trusted positions. His resume was exotic. His voice was too intense. And interviews always ended with a forced smile and an, "We'll call you." The janitor at Wellington Global was, in fact, a man who knew more about Chinese culture than anyone in that tower. A silent polyglot, an invisible translator, a giant with his head bowed. In the boardroom, Vivian greeted the Shengxin representatives, smiles, nods, but no understanding. The man at the front, Mr. Li, spoke firmly, but no one comprehended. Eyes met, tense. The Chinese sensed the discomfort. It was embarrassing. Minutes passed and the meeting was sinking before everyone's eyes. Vivian cleared her throat, tried to gesture, pointed at the papers, tried a phone app, which mistranslated stock negotiation into slave donation. That's when Nathan walked in. Silent, uninvited. Hands clean but gloves still in his pockets. He crossed the room under scornful stares. A security guard stepped forward, but Vivian raised her hand, too confused to react with anger. "Sorry to interrupt," Nathan said in English, "but if you'll allow me, I can help." Then he turned to the Chinese and spoke. Mandarin, fluent, elegant, without hesitation. For a moment, everyone froze. Mr. Li's eyes widened, then he smiled. He began to respond, now with enthusiasm. Vivian, motionless at the head of the table, felt the world spin in slow motion. It was like watching a movie scene unfold live. That man, the man who cleaned bathrooms, scrubbed floors, and changed trash cans, was now speaking like a seasoned diplomat, with a tone that carried decades of study, experience, and patience. For an hour, Nathan translated everything, explained clauses, adjusted cultural expressions, corrected technical terms, and in 2 instances, suggested contract changes that made the Chinese nod with evident respect. In the end, Mr. Lee stood, shook Vivian's hand and said, now with Nathan translating calmly, "We are ready to sign. Your company has shown integrity, wisdom, and a great surprise." Vivian said nothing. She only nodded, unsure how to react. When the room emptied, she stood, looking at Nathan as if seeing him for the first time. And indeed, it was the first time. "Who are you?" she whispered. Nathan just smiled. "Someone who's listened for a long time." In the days that followed, the 45th floor of Wellington Global buzzed with unease. No one spoke directly about what had happened, but everyone knew. The whispers started in the elevators, trickled through the corridors, and exploded in the employee cafeteria. "Did you see what the janitor did?" they said in hushed tones. "He speaks Mandarin better than the official translator," others murmured. But not everyone was pleased. A group of senior executives led by Thomas Blake, the operations director known for his elitist demeanor and thinly veiled jabs at minorities, couldn't accept that the power narrative had been disrupted by someone like Nathan. In the first board meeting after the event, Thomas was blunt. "With all due respect, Mrs. Wellington, that man's exposure may have caused discomfort to our partners. We need to maintain protocol and hierarchy." Vivian didn't respond immediately. She looked at him with narrowed eyes, like someone inspecting a stain on a work of art. "Do you speak Chinese, Thomas?" "No, but..." "Then sit down and learn to listen. Do you have that habit?" The room fell silent. Thomas swallowed hard. For the first time in years, someone had sliced through his air of superiority with a fine blade. Meanwhile, Nathan returned to his usual routine. He arrived before dawn, swept the corridors in silence, overheard interrupted executive phone calls, read emails forgotten in printers, and mentally noted everything. He never sought to show off, didn't want applause, just wanted justice. That week, Vivian called him into her office. "I reviewed your file," she said, holding a porcelain teacup. "You studied in Chengdu, graduated in intercultural translation, taught in southern China, worked in embassies. Why were you cleaning floors?" Nathan smiled, a faint smile but full of scars. "Because no one wanted to hear my name, or look at my face." Vivian nodded. For the first time in years, she heard a truth that struck her. She herself had once been ignored for being a woman decades ago. Now she realized she had become part of a system that perpetuated the same silence. "I need you," she said. "Not as a janitor, but as a consultant, translator, analyst, whatever you want to call it." Nathan raised his eyes slowly. "And will the others accept that?" Vivian leaned forward. "They don't have a choice. But the corporate world is made of shadows, and not all dissipate with a good deed." Thomas Blake didn't swallow the humiliation. In silence, he began digging into Nathan's past, searching for any flaw. And he found one. An old fine for police contempt when Nathan was 24 and stopped while driving a white friend's car. Nothing serious, but enough in the hands of someone malicious to fuel gossip. Anonymous emails began circulating. Empty memos suggesting ethical reviews of employees in sensitive roles. The old dirty game of the corporate elite, Vivian noticed. "They'll try to bring you down, Nathan, like they do to anyone who doesn't fit their mold." "I know, but this time I'm ready." Nathan had kept every contract, every clause, every word. He knew of Thomas's maneuvers, the discrepancies in reports, the hidden bonuses for partners, the disguised lobbying. For months in silence he organized everything, not for revenge, but because he knew a rotten structure only falls when the foundation rises with evidence. The final turn came during the annual Corporate Transparency Conference, ironically organized by Thomas himself, a public self-promotion stunt to shield his image. The hall was packed with journalists, investors, partners. Vivian watched from the front row, motionless. Nathan was among the sound technicians, invisible again, but only at first glance. Halfway through Thomas's presentation, an apparently accidental technical glitch interrupted the slides. For a moment, the lights dimmed and the screen flickered. When it returned, it wasn't the company logo on display, it was a contract, then spreadsheets, and then recorded audio. Thomas's voice. "Nobody needs to know about these bonuses. The Chinese will sign anything if there's champagne on the table." Another audio. "The janitor. Oh, he's probably cleaning my trash while we profit." Vivian stood, icy. The room fell into absolute silence. Thomas's face paled live, in front of dozens of witnesses. He tried to speak, but the evidence spoke louder. Nathan calmly stepped onto the stage, took the microphone. "I didn't want this. I just wanted to work, to speak, to contribute. But they taught me there's only one way to break the silence, with truths shouted through loudspeakers." And he looked at Thomas firmly. "You laughed at me, stepped on me, used the system to erase me, but today you'll have to answer." Vivian stepped onto the stage next, touched Nathan's shoulder, faced the audience. "Wellington Global changes today. This man here represents what this company should be. Competent, discreet, resilient, and just. And as of today, he is the new Director of Intercultural Relations." Applause. Some timid, others emotional. Thomas was sacked the next day. Investigations followed. The company's stocks dipped, then soared higher with the new policy of inclusion, diversity, and transparency launched by Nathan. He didn't want the spotlight, but he became a symbol of a silent revolution. In the 45th floor corridor weeks later, Vivian crossed paths with him again, but this time she stopped. "You know, Nathan, sometimes God hides the greatest voices in the most forgotten places, just so that, when they speak, no one can ignore them." He nodded, eyes misty, and replied in Chinese, "Even the stones cry out when the world falls silent." 2 months passed. The 45th floor had changed, not just in decor, now more sober, more human, but in atmosphere. Eyes no longer looked down on the cleaning staff. The elevator stopped and waited. Conversations began to include questions. Names began to be spoken. Nathan walked those corridors with the same humility as always, but now with a gold badge that read, Director. He still arrived early, still greeted the security guards by name, still stopped to listen to the kitchen lady who needed a reimbursement for worn-out shoes. Only now, when he spoke, he was heard. Vivian, meanwhile, began to fade from the spotlight. Aware of her age and limits, she understood it was time to pass the baton, not just of the role, but of the company's culture. She saw in Nathan what she hadn't seen in anyone in a long time, the strength of integrity paired with the ability to remain whole amid ashes, and he, though reluctant, accepted the mission. In early March, a new policy was announced, the Invisible Voice, a program of scholarships and internal mentorships to identify hidden talents among the most underestimated roles. Janitors, drivers, kitchen staff, security guards all gained access to training, growth opportunities, and above all, a listening ear. The impact was immediate. International newspapers reported, "Janitor becomes director and revolutionizes internal policy of financial giant." Blogs echoed, "A new model of silent leadership is emerging." But Nathan avoided interviews. He preferred to act. And it was there, in the day-to-day, that his revolution pressed on. In room 12, a Guatemalan immigrant janitor named Rosario, who spoke 4 languages and had hidden out of fear of deportation, was promoted to international communications assistant. In the parking lot, a security guard who had been an electrical engineer in Haiti and worked unrecognized for years was transferred to the network maintenance team. And they all had one thing in common. They had been seen. Finally, on the day Thomas Blake was officially judged by the Ethics Committee and had his professional license revoked for fraud and discrimination, Nathan didn't attend the meeting. He was in the cafeteria, eating lunch next to Marta, a 62-year-old woman who had cleaned the bathroom since the company's founding. She shared stories of her rural childhood, while he laughed, eyes misty. "You could be up there now, watching him fall," Marta said. Nathan smiled. The fall of someone who only rises by stepping on others doesn't need to be watched. It echoes on its own. The following week, a ceremony was held in the company auditorium. Vivian, in her traditional black suit with discreet pearls, announced her retirement. The applause was long, But the most striking moment wasn't her farewell. It was the presentation of a gift. A small, dark wooden box was placed on the podium. Vivian opened it and pulled out something unlikely, a pair of worn blue gloves. She held them up and looked at Nathan, who was in the front row. These were the gloves he wore when he cleaned the rooms he now leads. They are now an official symbol of what this company has chosen to be. The audience stood, not in frenzy, but in reverence. Nathan stepped up slowly, took the gloves, looked at them for a few seconds, then placed them inside his jacket, over his chest. "I won't forget where I came from," he said, "because that's where I saw everything I needed to change the world." A deep silence hung in the air. It was as if everyone was trying to breathe with him. Then, to everyone's surprise, he pulled a small folded paper from his pocket. It was old, a verse handwritten by his grandmother years ago, back in Chengdu. He read, voice trembling, "There are those who enter the temple through the front door and don't see God. But there are those who enter through the back, carrying a bucket and find eternity in the floor's reflection." He carefully folded the paper, looked at the crowd before him, people who once would never have listened, people who now waited in silence for his next words. It was never about power. It was about being seen. And when you truly see someone, something in the world changes. Forever. Vivian smiled, emotional, and said quietly, almost to herself, "Finally, someone worthy of this place." That night, Nathan didn't celebrate with champagne or go out to party. He took the subway home, sat next to a man sleeping with his head against the window, carried the same black briefcase he used when he was just the cleaning guy. At home, he hung the blue gloves in a small frame, next to his grandmother's photo, sat in the wooden chair she had brought from the mission. And there, over a cup of tea, he closed his eyes. He had cleaned many floors, but that day he cleaned something far deeper, the dirty ground of prejudice.